candle reception. She had a glass of wine in her hand, and I knew she was gonna need a connection. At the path of a raging man. You can't always get what you want.
Hi everyone. Welcome to Dynamics of the Digital Music Business, Part 1, Music Industry Overview. My name is Ken Umezaki, and before I get started, I want to thank the Virtual Music Conference and my friends at Indie Connect New York for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today regarding the state of the digital music business and where it may be headed. The main objective of today's conversation is to give you a high-level overview of the digital music business. Think of it as Digital Music Business 101. The conversation is intended for musicians and music business professionals who may be less familiar with what the digital music business actually means and why it's important to understand the dynamics behind it. This conversation is part of a two-part conversation. The second part, which focuses on the implications of what digital music is for musicians, will be available later in this conference. Before we get started, just a brief introduction about me. I wear a number of hats as it relates to the music business. First, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of a company called Section 101, which provides web presence tools for musicians, the music industry, and other media verticals. I'm an investor in digital music startups through my company Digital Daruma. I'm currently the co-chair of the New York board for a charitable organization called Little Kids Rock, which provides after-school programs for underprivileged kids and underprivileged school systems. And lastly, I play bass in a rock band called The Fifth of Bourbon. If you want to reach me at any point in time, feel free to do so at ken@section101.com. I also have over 25 years of experience in the financial services and investment banking sectors. Oh, and that's me in picture form. Let's get started. First, I'd like to get grounded by giving you a brief tour of what the music industry is about. Let's start by talking about just defining what the music business is. I'm going to start by saying you all know more about music than me, and we could spend hours on what the definition of music is, so let's leave that aside. What is business? Well, business is all about monetization, a fancy word for basically making money. And so the music business is about monetizing music-related assets. Let's take a look at how the industry's revenue streams have changed over the last decade or so. This table actually shows North American music revenues over the course of the last decade or so. There are three principal lines of revenues that are represented here: publishing, which is the yellow bar, live music, which is the orange bar, and then physical music sales, represented by digital in gray and physical in blue. As you can see, the last decade has been a period of tremendous change in terms of the constitution of the overall revenue stream. The music industry is actually growing at a very healthy rate and now is over $25 billion per year in terms of revenues in North America. Having said that, you can see the composition has changed tremendously as physical music sales have declined by over 50%. Digital music, which really started to be a phenomenon in 2005, 2006, has shown steady growth and now represents almost 50% of all music sales, while the live music industry has been thriving, and the publishing business, which is where you collect royalties, has also been growing at a steady rate. A few music industry factoids will give you a better feel for the dynamics associated with being involved in music. First, let's take a look at the top music markets. Music is clearly a global cultural commodity, if you will. But having said that, as you can see, in terms of the markets, it's dominated by the top 5. The US, Japan, the UK, Germany, and France, making up almost 70% of all of the recorded music sales in 2009. In terms of genres, music has a vast array of types of music that you can enjoy. However, from an industry perspective, you can see rock, pop, country dominate basically album sales. And so the focal point for a lot of the industry resources has been in those genres. Of course, many musicians make a great livelihood in other genres such as jazz and classical. However, in terms of album sales, those markets are much smaller. The music industry is often characterized as an industry of hits, and this chart illustrates that pretty dramatically, in my opinion. These are the top 100 albums and the number of units they sold during 2011. As you can see, the number 1 album sold over 5 million copies, but by the time you get to 100 or so, you can see they're selling far below 200,000 albums. In aggregate, the top 100 account for about 18% of the units sold. Having said that, with 80,000 new albums in 2011, only 5,000 sold more than 1,000 copies. That's about 6% of the entire release catalog actually sold over 1,000. So you can imagine the tail is in fact very, very long in music. Lastly, let's take a look at the major industry players. In recorded music, the big 3 account for approximately 80% of all of the record sales in the United States. In terms of live ticketing, there's really only one choice today, although that's changing. It's Ticketmaster, which holds about 80% of all tickets sold run through the Ticketmaster system. In publishing, or royalty collection, the big 3 collectively hold about 75% market share. Lastly, in radio, terrestrial radio, the top 4 radio conglomerates own approximately 65% of the listenership. So that's Clear Channel, Cumulus, Citadel, and CBS, all beginning with C, coincidentally. Anyways, the point overall here is that the music business in its traditional forms is a highly consolidated industry. Now that you have a lay of the land, if you will, around how the music industry is set up, at least from a traditional perspective, let's turn our attention a little bit to what the music business's primary function actually is. For that, let's talk a little bit about the framework around the music business. Ultimately, in music, there is a consumer, or a fan, and a creator, or a musician, as depicted here. Fundamentally, each of these people actually have a set of behaviors, if you will, or things they do as it relates to music. Let's start with the consumer. In a very overgeneralized way, you can actually characterize consumer behavior in music into 4 basic verbs, if you will. They discover music, they own, in some cases stream music, they experience music through, let's say, a live show, and they also share music amongst their friends. These verbs are very, very common behaviors for any consumer at any point in time throughout the history of music. On the creator side, there are a few more verbs, if you will, but broadly, these are the activities that any artist would actually engage in. Chances are you're creating your own music. You're interested in distributing or selling your music in recorded form. You might sell other things, including merchandise. You clearly would want to perform live, at least in most cases. You'd want to engage and grow your fan base. You'd be interested in collecting royalties associated with the use of your music. And lastly, you'll continually look for opportunities to connect with music industry professionals to further broaden your reach and your acceptance of your music. A really, really simple way to think about the music business is it enables these verbs, if you will, to happen for the creator and for the consumer. In some cases, of course, it's about connecting the creator to the consumer. Once again, very basic framework which has always existed across the music business. What digital has done in essence, from a framework perspective, is it has used technology to enable, enhance, and in some cases even disrupt these verbs, or if you will, behaviors associated with consumers and creators. As you think through how the music industry and how the music business can help you, think in terms of these verbs and whether or not the services that these people and or these technology tools are providing are helping you accomplish those goals associated with those verbs. Let's take a look at how different the music experience is from, say, about 20 years ago to today. Back to our fan, who's really into this particular rock band. And, of course, back then, the same sort of verbs, or if you will, experiences associated with music: discovery, ownership, experience, and share. And the mechanisms by which you did that. In the 90s, large, if you will, publications such as Rolling Stone and the radio were probably the two main ways you actually got to learn about a new band. Owning something, back then it might have been a record or maybe even a cassette, probably meant going to a retailer, a dedicated retailer like Tower Records, for music. Experiencing a rock show was actually pretty much about live music and the experience. Going to shows in your local venues. And lastly, if you wanted to share something, chances are you cut yourself a little mixtape and shared it with your friends. Over here is the band you love. In order for that band or that person to get to you, the actual consumer of music, you had to go through a bunch of different people in each of these channels to get there. There's quite a lot of distance between the fan and the creator, and there were many, many gatekeepers who were controlling access for the consumer to you, the creator. For the privilege of this access to the consumer, for every $1 a fan plays, the industry took about 85 cents in aggregate, and the artist made about 15 cents for every $1. It was a very, very large toll historically, if you will, for that access. Having said that, it was a very, very simple and what I'll call a monolithic business model, and allowed tremendous amount of consolidation that you actually saw earlier in our presentation. Let's take a look at what it feels like today. Here's the fan again. The fan is probably a little bit more all over the place and has many, many more options in terms of how to experience music. You, the creator, are in the middle, and you actually have almost no distance between you and your fan, whether it's in discovery, in access, as we call it today, as opposed to ownership. So whether it's Spotify, Mog, or other forms of streaming, you tend to have access to music instead of ownership. You experience music still in live form, and you continue to share music with your friends. The big difference now is technology has enabled a lot of new ways for you to do all these things, and has created almost no distance between creator and fan as a result. Let's take a look at discovery. Pandora, which is sort of a, if you will, a tightly dialed radio station. The symbol there is for a app called Discover, which allows you to connect similar acts to bands that you know. Pitchfork and blogging as opposed to Rolling Stone magazine. These are all new ways you can discover music. Let's talk about access and experience. Well, we went from Tower Records to iTunes. We've gone from owning music or downloading music to now streaming it through services like Spotify. On the live music side, you've added a completely new way for technology to actually allow a live music experience to be enjoyed by your fans. For example, you can actually do a concert right from your bedroom using tools like Stage It. Technology has also changed the way we think about live performance. Think about how multimedia most large-scale live shows are today. Or, in some cases, like in the case of Tupac, you can actually bring people back from the dead using holographic technology, which I think would not have been possible 10 years ago for sure without technology development. Lastly, in terms of sharing and also discovering music, you have a whole new way thanks to the social networks that have been developed. When you think about it, not that long ago. Twitter is still only 4 years old. Facebook is 8 years going on 9. YouTube is a new phenomenon as well, which has now become the #1 way people actually discover music. All these things are new. Broadly speaking, these are all tools that both the fan or the consumer and the creator or the artist can use and leverage to much better control themselves how their music is experienced. The impact of digital technology on the music business is ubiquitous. Every type of behavior and every business function has been impacted, especially over the last 5 years, by the rapid growth in technology and really behavior associated with using the technology available. If you think about it, everything that the music business does, from selling CDs to touring to marketing to managing a band to funding a band's growth to how you produce a record and how you actually invest in talent over time, have all been influenced by technology. Some examples, of course, would include Spotify, which has changed the way people think about accessing music and accessing a library of music through a subscription model. Touring, you can now tour without actually going on the road by using services like Stage It. Even discovering new artists has been influenced by technology. My studio, which is pictured in the middle here, is a portable professional recording studio which TV shows like The X Factor actually use to source talent for their show. Kickstarter has been used successfully by many musicians to raise money to fund their projects through their fan base and associates. In music production, low-cost digital audio workstations and digital audio software like Logic Pro, which you can get for $200, actually is transforming the way engineers, recording studios, and mastering studios actually have to compete. And lastly, collecting royalties has been transformed because of digital transmission, and therefore you now have a new, if you will, performance rights organization called Sound Exchange, whose sole purpose it is to collect royalties from digital transmission companies and play them to the appropriate people. Basically, everything is going digital. But is digital actually important? Does it really matter at the end of the day? Well, it's certainly growing in terms of consumer behavior, in terms of listening to music. This is from our friends at Next Big Sound, who recently produced their annual report, if you will, for online music consumption. Pretty staggering numbers show up. Over 93 billion music tracks were played online, and 5 billion new fans were engaged with music online relative to the year before. New plays represented 45% growth over 2011 and over 67% growth over 2011 for the fan base. You're also seeing new types of ways that people consume music pop up all the time. SoundCloud is actually this year's favorite choice, it seems, for growth. In terms of actual plays on SoundCloud, especially from towards the tail end of this year, you can see the social music service has tripled the number of plays on average through its service. I think it's hard to ignore these types of growth rates when you're sitting here and thinking about digital. So, what are some of the fundamental principles that the digital music business actually represents? Well, the first and most important one, in my opinion, is the amount of different ways you can now experience music, or if you will, the options that both a consumer and a creator has to actually define what they want to do. If you're a creator, you now have way more control over your music, how it gets distributed, where you perform, what type of music you decide to release, and all the other things that are available to you. In essence, you have more control over your own destiny and your own definition of what success is. The digital music business is obviously about bytes, not atoms. If you will, it's about stuff that happens on the computer, not plastic discs you sell at a Tower Records. An extremely important concept that is really relevant for all media types is the development of access as being the way people will consume media as opposed to owning media. You're seeing that transformation happen in music through services like Spotify, and eventually many people predict that the entire music business will sort of be a subscription-based service, and whether that's attached to your cell phone or as part of your cable bill, those types of things will dominate the way we think about music. Music has gone from a scarce resource to an abundant resource. That has tremendous ramifications in an age, and frankly, in a consumer orientation, which has a fixed amount of time to consume leisure activity. It's extremely important, therefore, that people understand that they're competing with a lot more different types of leisure activities, as well as an abundance of media options for which to spend your leisure time. Leisure time is fixed, media is abundant. How you make a difference in terms of penetrating and figuring out how to break above that digital static, if you will, is a tremendous challenge for musicians today. Direct to fan. We talked about how the distance to a fan is effectively zero. And what that means is that you can control, as the creator, how you actually engage with your fan base. In the old business model, there were intermediaries upon intermediaries, and very often you had no idea who your fans actually were. Now, chances are they'll find you, and they'll let you know how you're doing. The music business has historically been a year business, if you will. Understanding and being able to listen and figure out how to find that next big star was an art form, and it will continue to be so throughout the course of history. Having said that, you now have much more data, whether it's social network statistics, sales, listenership on SoundCloud, and other metrics that allow you to kind of benchmark how you're doing. And leveraging that data, I think, is extremely important going forward for music business professionals as well as the artists to understand. Lastly, and this might be a little bit cut off on the screen, I apologize, music is becoming a multimedia business. And whether that's a live show, which has tremendous pyrotechniques and video displays associated with music, to the fact that YouTube is actually the biggest music discovery channel in the world today, all tells you that music is going beyond a pure audio experience. And it's important to recognize that making sure your music can be consumed in a multimedia or visual fashion is as important as the audio itself. Despite its benefits and its growth, the digital music isn't without its challenges. Probably the biggest dilemma that we have today in the music industry is how to monetize what has traditionally been dominated by recorded music, and how do we actually make sure we continue to invest in new artists and artist development. The chart on the right actually shows a precipitous decline in the gold and platinum awards given by the RIAA for album sales over the last decade and a half or so. Peaked at around 1,100 in 2001 to down to just over 200 in 2011. What this really means in a world where the music industry requires hits, if you will, is that the amount of investment dollars available for artists from traditional sources like the labels has declined dramatically. This has very, very big implications in an industry where it typically takes 5 to 7 years for an artist to break, if you will. Where does the money come from? There's also a dilemma in a sense where music, at least recorded music, is more or less free.
I got good sea legs from a year of trying to find my footing, and I'm missing my home even more than I should. You're as nice an idea as the ocean is blue, especially if you were true. So much destruction in your wake, I woke and watched you dreaming. So there are no mistakes and only variations on a theme. And you can hide a child in the body of a man, and you can take more than you think you can. Forget all the lessons we learned, you should have been good to me. Forget all the lessons we learned, you should have been true. Forget all the lessons we learned, the lessons we learned. You could have been good to me.
Music is Addie's life. She and artists like her deserve a chance to make a living from it. When you download music illegally, you're stealing from musicians, songwriters, and people like Addie who are denied payment for work that is rightfully theirs. Do what's right. Don't download illegal copies of music, movies, or software. Get it legally. Illegal downloads are not victimless crimes. You have the power to stop them.
Despite many efforts by the industry to shore up the value of recorded audio, I'm afraid the reality probably is that it's really hard to fight with free, and that the industry needs to transform itself to a viable ecosystem, if you will, without a reliance on $15 CDs or $1 digital downloads. Another large challenge for the music industry in this digital world is creating the right infrastructure to support the myriad ways in which people consume music and ways they get distributed. As an example, Sound Exchange, which collects royalties for artists and copyright owners from digital transmissions such as satellite radio and places like Pandora actually have a very big data issue, as you can see here. In 2011, they paid almost $300 million to artists. However, about $60 million, or 20%, went unclaimed due to data errors and, frankly, the fact that artists have not registered with the Sound Exchange to collect their royalties. Many, many other challenges in a widely distributed way people consume music exist for monetization and collection of rightfully owned rights for artists. Lastly, the business investment climate for digital music is still at a very, very early stage. The basic question we need to ask is digital music a really good bet from an overall business investment perspective? There are some good news. You're starting to see IPOs of music companies that are definitely in the digital domain, if you will, like Pandora. And we're also seeing large companies such as Google and Live Nation acquire music startups for their own purposes. In 2011, there was about $500 million raised for music startups. The reality is that's a very, very small amount of investment, certainly relative to other industries. From what I understand, less than 10 out of the 400 or so venture capital firms will even look at digital music companies as viable investment opportunities. In such an environment, there are still very large bets being made, some of them which are somewhat questionable. For example, a company called Beyond Oblivion raised $77 million in 2011 and within 9 months declared bankruptcy. Clearly, it's a very treacherous environment for which to invest. Unless that changes, digital music will take a long time to actually penetrate and become mainstream. The last point I'll make around the challenge is actually the fact that there are many, many new companies that are pursuing many different technologies and many different services, all in the sort of space, if you will, of digital music. By one estimate, there are over 2,000 digital music service companies, big and small, in the music space today. With my banking hat on, I look at that number and I know for sure that not all 2,000 companies will be successful. And what it probably means is that the industry needs to consolidate and, frankly, figure out bigger problems to solve and provide better services to a broader client base in order to survive. With all these issues that we have with digital music, is it actually making the music community a better place? I think the resounding answer is yes, but I'm sure you're tired of me explaining that to you. So I had a couple of my colleagues and my friends chime in on what they thought were some of the benefits associated with digital music.
You know, is digital better or worse for the music community? I mean, clearly it's better, and the reason I feel that is you now have more control over your career than you had before. You have more tools, and you have more ways to connect with fans and to build an audience. And I think that this digital technology has taken some of the risk out of the music industry, not entirely, but to a certain extent, where more skill and less luck is now part of the equation, where you can use these tools to build your career, build your fan base, build your tours, and try different things. So I believe that the future is really in the hands of the skillful as opposed to the lucky few. And I think that's a big change in what we're seeing with digital technology.
I think it's better, especially if you're an artist. It's better because previously, pre-digital, you really only had the option to go through gatekeepers, and now you can go direct to fan. It's not easy. It's still being worked out. The best way to build fan bases and manage fan bases online and monetize those fan bases. But the possibility exists for you to do that, whereas before it didn't. So in that regard, it's better. For me personally, in my career, I started out on the traditional side of the music business, but I've been working on the digital side of the music business for about 11 years now, which makes me an old-timer in this space. And the more the industry comes around, the better it is. They say that in the race to adopt new technologies, the music industry finishes just ahead of the Amish. And that's been my experience over the last 11 years. But things are definitely better now, and they're just going to keep getting better.
So there you have it. Digital music is definitely here to stay. I'd like to conclude by talking a little bit about some of the trends we're seeing in the digital music business, as well as provide a little bit of a forecast in terms of what lies ahead longer term. As I mentioned earlier, I think the biggest thing that we're going to see over the next few years within the industry of digital music itself is actually companies seeking out synergy and integration. The bottom line is that 2,000 company number I referred to before has to go down, and it's going to be a combination of providing better and more useful tools, and perhaps a set of tools as opposed to solving a single problem, as well as creating enough, if you will, critical mass of clients for any business to actually survive longer term. This ultimately is a tremendous proposition for both consumers and creators of music. Technology has long struggled with people adopting it easily. I think on the consumer side of music, you're seeing tremendous progress on that front in terms of user friendliness, although there's always more room to improve. On the artist services side, however, I still feel that there is a ton of work that can be done to make what is not necessarily the most technology-oriented group of people to actually look at these technologies as a friend as opposed to a burden. The digital music business will continue to break down the barriers across the globe, both in terms of ability for creators to collaborate, as well as consumers to discover and enjoy music from across the entire world. At the same time, our connectivity to the digital world is actually moving from desktops to smartphones, iPads, etc., and is basically going mobile. So we can expect that a lot of the digital music services that are available today on desktop land will actually become available in the form of mobile applications in the not too distant future. I want to bring back David and Mike to give us a little glimpse of what they think are important trends over the next few years in digital music.
I think out in the future, one of the things that I hope we see is more efficient touring. How can we carve costs out of tours using digital technology? And some examples of that are remote tours like Stage It, and a few other platforms where you can actually play a show in your living room or your studio and broadcast that show out to your audience. I think that is a fantastic way of touring without leaving your city, but also reaching your audience, letting them participate and engage, and carving the costs out where all the money goes into your pocket rather than into gas and hotels and food and all of that. So I think that's a big deal. Also in that realm, you see tools like Detour and others allowing you to find pockets of fans around the world so that when you're physically out on the road, you can optimize a tour and not waste days, say, not performing when you can cruise into a small town and play a house concert for 50 people or something like that to make your tour more efficient. So I think that's a trend we're going to see more of in the future.
over the next few years, I really think we're going to see a honing of curation, of music recommendation, and bringing to consumers the music that they love and are most likely to enjoy going forward. There's so much research and work and investment going into this area that it can't help but improve. And it's really the next kind of holy grail of this whole music space. And not just on the consumer side, although the consumer side is going to be very noticeable, and probably the most noticeable, apparently. But on the industry side, helping industry professionals identify high potential songs and talent, or opportunity appropriate songs and talent, which is the area that I work in specifically, is really going to get better, and it's really going to become impactful.
I want to conclude our conversation by talking a little bit about what's coming down the road around the digital music business. I think it's important to think about the fact that digital music is here to stay. And importantly, it's a tremendous enabler across many, many aspects of both the music and other media verticals. We've spoken a little bit about how it gives you more control and gives you more options, both as a consumer and as a creator of music. Fundamentally, the digital music business provides a new and efficient business environment from which to conduct business. We spoke a little bit about how it enables these verbs, whether you're a consumer or creator, to experience music in new and enhanced ways. It's clearly involved in the creative process in terms of making it both more efficient and more exciting to participate in creating new music. It's also relevant in the context of the global economy in terms of how you can collaborate much more easily across the globe and across time zones to actually create and experience music. The same holds true for the relationship between business and the artist, or business and the consumer, where a lot more collaborative and useful technologies are being developed in a cost-effective way. Lastly, the old adage of thinking globally but acting locally is enabled through the various technologies that have been developed and will continue to be developed in the digital music business going forward. In order for the digital music business to continue to grow, there's some fundamental needs or changes that need to happen, in my opinion. First, we need to continue to think about lowering the cost of the services we provide by being intermediaries between creator and consumer. The traditional business model, which extracted almost 85 cents for every dollar a fan pays for music, is definitely not sustainable in this new world where recorded music is basically free and other forms of monetization need to be pursued. Efficiency around the middleman function is the key here. In order to attract more investment for longer-term growth within the music business itself, there needs to be more regulatory certainty. As we saw, it's an extremely treacherous place to invest, and many people choose deliberately not to look at the space for investing in the future because it's deemed as too risky or not having a great economic model behind it in order for businesses to ultimately be profitable. A lot of that revolves around regulations, and a lot of that revolves around making the place called digital music a safe place for investors to actually spend their investment dollar. There are over 2,000 digital music service companies out there basically focused on both the consumer and also the artist. And frankly, that's too many. It's in stark contrast, obviously, to the highly consolidated traditional music industry, and I actually think they need to find a much happier medium. So you can expect consolidation, both within the music industry and also across media verticals. We're starting to see that trend in more recent acquisitions, including Beats Audio acquiring Topspin, and also Backstage acquiring Sonic Bids, which I think is interesting because it's marrying, if you will, film, and Broadway acting and music businesses together to create more synergies and get access to a larger universe of clients. When you think about it, a lot of what the digital music business does in terms of enabling those verbs we discussed earlier are actually common across all media verticals. We need to de-risk artist development and fan acquisition. Lots of tools exist, from crowdfunding, such as Kickstarter or Pledge Music, and there are many, many mechanisms to reduce the risk of developing new talent. But as a cultural art form, music needs new music and new musicians to continue to explore and expand the palette, if you will, of what's available to us as consumers. Lastly, technology for technology's sake never really works. And at the end of the day, the digital music business needs to think of how technology can be a friendly and useful tool across the community that it's trying to serve. That's it. Thank you for listening today. And I hope you got something out of it in terms of better understanding how the digital music business is set up and some of the changes and things we are anticipating in the future. I'd like to thank Mike McCready and David Cusack for contributing to our conversation today. And lastly, I'd like to leave you with a list of references, things that I actually look at rather on a daily basis, like the blogs listed here, or books I refer to when I want to brush up on the music industry. As always, you can reach me at ken@section101.com if you want to pursue any of these topics in greater detail. Please remember that Part 2, which is the implications of digital music business for artists, is coming up later in the conference. Once again, thanks to the Virtual Music Conference and to my friends at Indie Connect New York for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. We'll now move to a moderated chat session where I can answer some of your questions. Thank you very much.